Thanks for that, Emer. And good afternoon, everyone. The focus of my presentation this afternoon is on the Circular Economy and Waste chapter of the State of the Environment report. The previous report in 2020, the comparative chapter was entitled Waste. So the title has now changed and shifted, and that really reflects the growing importance of the circular economy as a policy area. So in my presentation today, I'm going to give an overview of that chapter. I'm going to look at the current situation in terms of consumption use, waste generation, look at it in terms of infrastructure and how we're getting towards, or how we're progressing towards our targets. I look at the drivers that are driving our current behaviours around consumption of resources and waste. We look at the pressures and how we're responding, that piece around implementation, to see where we're currently at, and then some concluding remarks. So to dive straight into it, Ireland is attempting to move from a polluting and damaging linear economy, which is characterised by high volumes of resource extraction and high volumes of waste generation. And we're trying to move to a circular economy, which is regenerative, characterised by maximising the use of our extracted resources, higher levels of resource efficiency, prevention of waste through better design and durable goods, more intensive reuse and repair activities, and the recirculation of secondary waste as resource for future products. So that's the preface. So what is the current situation? In our chapter this year, we introduce a metric called the Circular Material Use Rate, or circularity rate. This particular measure, in simple terms, looks at the recirculation of resources back into our economy, and how does that compare to our use of our natural resources, both naturally extracted and imported. This Sankey chart here, as you follow it from the left-hand side, highlights the resources that Ireland's extracts naturally and imports, brings into our economy, uses those within economic activities in the middle there, manufacturing and other activities such as in the built environment, and then following over to the right-hand side, our exports, our wastes and our emissions that come out from those flows. So it's a whole of economy picture of our resource and material flows. The interesting part of this is to look down towards the bottom, and this indicates the backflows of materials back into our economy. And what you'll notice by the very bottom thin line, which hopefully is visible on the screen there, about how light that is compared to the resources. So it's very small compared to the amount of resources we're actually using in our economy. And this is the measure of the circularity rate in simple terms. What you'll see here on this particular slide is that Ireland's circularity rate is currently 3%, as confirmed by the recent Circularity Gap report for Ireland as published by the Department of the Environment. The graph shows our performance against other member states. We are the small green bars, and compared to the European average of 12%, we have a long way to go to meet that average, which is what our aim is. By this simple metric, we are not performing well, and we have a long journey ahead of us. But this rate is just simply one measure. It also reflects certain characteristics of Ireland. It is an island nation with an open economy. We have higher imports than other member states of resources. But it is also noteworthy that our domestic extraction is higher per capita than the European average. And this is particularly centred around two sectors, the built environment and agriculture. Waste generation is a feature of our current linear economy, and in the chapter we highlight the challenges we face to reduce generation across many waste streams. In the graph that I'm showing here, it highlights the generation of waste streams in Ireland from 2012 to 2021. Over this period, waste generation has grown across all of our major streams. Startlingly, our total waste generated in Ireland has grown from over 12 million tonnes in 2012 to now over 17 million tonnes by 2021. This is almost a 40% growth, which is really concerning. Construction waste, which is the brown portion of this particular graph, stands out as it is the largest waste stream. It currently is over 50% of the total waste generated in Ireland. It has grown significantly. In 2014, for example, we had 3 million tonnes of construction waste. In 2021, we hit 9 million tonnes. Over 80% of our construction waste comprises soil and stone, the majority of which is clean. So there's real opportunities there to reduce our construction waste, and be more on that later. As mentioned earlier, food waste is a real issue for us here in Ireland, and in the chapter we bring detail into that around food waste in Ireland, and this is summarised here on this slide. We now report on food waste every year to the European Commission, which is something we weren't doing previously, and we report across our entire supply chain, which is very different, and it's the first time that we're doing this type of measurement for a waste stream. And what it does is it highlights the key points of generation within that supply chain. From the chart, you can see high generating parts include manufacturing, food services, and households. Generating food waste, as we've heard, has significant environmental costs. The UN have stated that food waste is responsible for 9 to 10% of climate emissions. It also has significant financial costs for businesses and industry. The chart there shows that food sector businesses are wasting over €300 million annually by not managing their food waste properly. So there's real opportunities there as well. Mandatory reduction targets are forthcoming under the amendments to the Waste Framework Directive, and that's going to further focus actions on key parts of the food waste supply chain. As we move now towards a circular economy, we are now beginning to have to measure the circular economy, and there's new metrics that we are now reporting on. The EPA now reports on reuse as an activity in the Irish economy. In 2021, 55,000 tonnes of items, second-hand items, were either bought or exchanged in Ireland. Textiles accounts for over 70% of these items that were exchanged. It's actually a staggering figure of over 11 million items were reused in that 1 year. E-products, they account for the highest amount of reuse because it's a weight-based metric. The average reuse per person in Ireland is over 10 kg per person annually, and that figure is now growing. We now have a target of 20 kg national target to reach within the next coming of years. So in terms of infrastructure, how are we managing all of this waste that we're actually generating in the country? As was mentioned earlier on, our waste management system and infrastructure in Ireland has been completely changed in the past 25 years. We have moved away from highly polluting dumps, which were located across the country, to properly engineered and tightly regulated landfill facilities. This transformation has required significant investment to clean up and remediate old sites and build modern facilities. We now just have 3 landfill facilities operating in Ireland which accept residual waste, which is extraordinary considering that not less than 15 years ago, this number was closer to 30. So in phasing out our landfills, there has been significant investment in new waste recovery infrastructure. We now have 2 non-hazardous incinerators operating in the state, primarily for municipal waste, providing over 900,000 tonnes of capacity, licensed treatment capacity. And both of these facilities are operating at capacity. These facilities not only treat significant quantities of residual waste, they generate significant quantities of energy which is exported to our national grid. Other infrastructure, such as cement kilns and mechanical processing, have also been developed and are licensed to treat residual waste. Regulation has played a key role in terms of the change of infrastructure in Ireland too. The introduction of regulation requiring separate collection of food waste from commercial premises and householders in 2010 and 2013, as shown here on this graph, have led to a significant growth in the quantities of bio-waste being collected separately. This in turn has supported the development and growth of composting and AD facilities. Progress is evident from this chart, but it has been slow, and segregated food waste services are not provided to all businesses and householders in the state. Without easy access to infrastructure, we cannot make the improvements that are urgently needed. As has been mentioned several times today, our infrastructure is incomplete, and this is no different in the waste sector. And currently, to meet our needs, we are continuing to export significant quantities of our waste, which means we remain reliant on others to recycle our waste and to treat our residual waste. The data shown here paints a discouraging picture and a disappointing picture when we look back over the last 10 years. The portion of total waste exported for municipal and hazardous waste has actually grown instead of decreased. In 2021, for example, 1.2 million tonnes of municipal waste was exported for treatment. 800,000 tonnes of that for recycling, 400,000 tonnes of that as residual waste being exported to waste energy facilities in other countries who then generate energy and heat their homes and their businesses. There are real investment opportunities not being realised in Ireland here, and our system remains vulnerable while we lack this self-sufficiency. So the changes to our collection and treatment infrastructure that we have seen over the last 20 odd years, this has changed how we manage our municipal waste, and in general it has changed it for the better. We are no longer overly reliant on landfill. The graph here shows if you look at the purple portion, the reduction in the amount of our municipal waste that currently goes for disposal. And you can see from 2012 to 2021 that has been declining, which is good news. But as we progress towards a circular economy, we want recycling to be the more dominant form of treatment. Recycling is represented on this graph by the green portion. And what you'll note is that from 2012 to 2021, it has essentially stagnated. There's a flat line there, mirroring earlier comments being made by the EEA as well across Europe. But what's really disappointing is that in 2012, our recycling rate was at 40%. By 2021, this has only increased by 1% to 41%. And what does that stagnation mean? That stagnation means the consequence of that, we are looking at risk, seriously at risk, at missing upcoming 2025 targets for packaging, municipal waste, and plastic packaging. The graph here is trying to illustrate with the numbers, with the lines on the left-hand side, our current position, where we are currently, and then the gap to their specific targets. It's particularly acute for municipal waste recycling and plastic packaging recycling. We need urgent measures to actually address this in terms of rollout of infrastructure, regulatory and incentive measures to make sure industry, businesses and householders that we're all playing our part. So what is the drivers that are driving this current situation? Well, we've known for a long time that economic and population growth are key drivers of resource extraction and waste generation. Following the national recession in Ireland, we've experienced a period of sustained economic growth. We are at full employment, and our population is one of the fastest growing in Europe. During this period of growth and prosperity, our rate of consumption of resources and waste generation has grown significantly too. The graph here is just a simple illustration of that. It shows the close relation between economic growth, represented by GNI, and waste generation from the period 2012 to 2021. As the economy has grown, so too has our wastes. And the challenge now for us is to decouple these key drivers from resource extraction and waste. But to address this requires a fundamental shift in the way we extract our resources, the way our production and our purchasing habits. We need higher rates of resource circulation in the economy to lower the extraction of primary resources. We need more efficient production cycles, which use less feedstocks and produce less waste. We need better design of products and of systems that support the right behaviours of our consumers and their purchasing behaviours. Regulation has a huge role to play here to ensure performance standards, fairness and compliance requirements are set and achieved. As has been mentioned a number of times today, legislation and policy are key drivers of change. European legislation has been instrumental in setting the framework and the high-level requirements for the transition to a circular economy. We now in Ireland have a strong legislative and policy framework in place for the circular economy, as you'll see from this slide, which shows a wide range of selection of specific policies, plans and programmes for the circular economy area. It's also a real positive that we have now a circular economy, a dedicated piece of primary legislation, the Circular Economy Act. We also see circular economy related actions appearing in lots of other policy area documents as well. So it is very much a busy cross-governmental policy space. However, as has been mentioned on numerous times today, implementation of legislation is absolutely key to driving the transition, and the circular economy and waste area is no different. Because the pressures on our environment from the current linear approach are real and very damaging. Recently we had the International Resource Panel speak at our National Circular Economy Conference, And in their most recent Global Outlook report, they stated that resource extraction and processing accounts for 55% of greenhouse gas emissions, 90% of biodiversity loss, and 40% of total PM pollution. These are very significant numbers. And I think what we're hearing today, the State of the Ireland report for Ireland, is echoing similar findings, highlighting how Ireland's environment is under pressure and in some cases damaged. And if we are to continue to thrive as a society, responsible and sustainable consumption, which reduces pressures on our environment, is non-negotiable. So how are we responding? How are we doing on that implementation piece? Well, to start off, it's certainly worth mentioning that we are responding with much more targeted policy actions and plans, with clear actions, ownerships, timelines, and targets. The examples shown here in the areas of food waste, green public procurement, and bioeconomy, and there's more on many of these plans coming. I mean, we need these focused plans to bring about the type of sectoral changes which are required. And timely implementation is an absolute, but so is accountability to deliver those changes. But we are seeing also system changes. Previous exemptions that existed under the food waste regulations for householders have been removed. So now it's a case of we should have mandatory collections of food waste from all of our households. That's not yet there now. There are many homes outside in Ireland, and there's probably many people in this room who have yet to have that service on their doorstep, and that needs to be urgently addressed. We have a new deposit return scheme, which has been introduced for the collection of cans and bottles, and the early signs have been very positive in terms of the use of that new system. We have introduced new levies to incentivise recycling and to reduce the amount of residual waste being put into our bins. In particular, the recovery levy, which now has a €10 charge on waste that goes to our waste energy plants and co-incineration plants. Ireland now, as a country, like other member states, contributes to the plastic own resources, which is a tax on unrecycled plastic packaging. And that's a significant cost now to the Irish economy. So all of these are trying to drive better change, higher rates of recycling in our economy. We have responded with specific regulatory measures as well, particularly targeting the built environment and construction sector. We have introduced 3 national decisions, 2 byproduct decisions targeting road planings and greenfield soil and stone, and 1 end-of-waste decision which targeting recycled aggregates. The hope is here that these decisions will support the construction sector transition from a linear to a circular business model. They reduce waste, they reduce resource construction, they encourage reuse and recycling, and they help to establish reliable and safe markets for the beneficial use of secondary materials. This is all done through a clear regulatory framework that introduces an even playing field for industry with a clear set of rules that are enforceable. And the signs so far are very positive. For example, under our national end of waste decision for recycled ags, we now have 40 operators who are registered under that decision to produce recycled aggregate materials, which means, hopefully into the future, recycled aggregates returning into the economy and less extraction of primary resources as a result. We are also responding to change behaviours, both of businesses and consumers. We have introduced a national food waste charter to tackle food waste from industries and businesses. This is supported not only by the EPA, but by government and the state agencies. And the businesses that are signing up to it commit to measure and take action to reduce their food waste. And it's gaining real positive traction at the moment. We are also researching the behaviours of our consumers and our businesses to understand how their attitudes and behaviours towards foods, plastics, textiles, and other activities. And that type of work is actually really informing policy actions and the communications that bring about change. And lastly, to say that we are also responding to our enforcement activities. Compliance is a key activity to ensure regulations are enforced. There is a level playing field for all stakeholders and the environment is protected. Enforcement in the waste area has increased since the previous State of the Environment report in 2020. It's not perfect, but there is a real uptake in activity. There are good enforcement structures in the waste sector, well established, such as the National Waste Enforcement Steering Committee and the shared model of the WERLAs working in the local government. We need to continue to invest in our enforcement resources so that individual bodies, the EPA, like the EPA, local authorities, the National Transfer Shipment Office, can continue to carry out their responsibilities, and also to fund, multi-agency approaches to complex waste enforcement cases. So to conclude, in our current State of the Environment report, the current environmental performance for the circular and waste area is rated as poor. So this is no change from the 2020 report. However, we recognise that progress is being made in a number of areas to improve performance, and the outlook is more positive. Many measures which have been introduced and which I've identified earlier on are at an earlier stage of implementation, and we've yet to see their full effectiveness net. So our key messages from the report is reducing resource consumption and preventing waste needs urgent focus. This has helped us to reduce our extraction of primary resource and will also help us to increase our recycling. Addressing infrastructure vulnerabilities to build our resilience and to build our self-sufficiency. This will open up our opportunities for us for investment to develop both our waste and circular economy infrastructure. And we need to accelerate our system and sectoral changes. And in particular, we need to target those high-impact sectors. Thank you for listening today, and I'd like to thank my other authors who supported, who worked so diligently on this particular chapter with me. Thank you.